All right, so welcome to this week's Fire Analytics meeting. I think on the agenda for today, Brian, I don't know if do you want to introduce yourself briefly and then we'll talk a little about the agenda?
Yeah, sure. Coming at this from two directions. I'm a VP in interoperability at Highmark Health, which is a large payer in the Blue Cross Blue Shield network. Actually, I think up to number three as far as the size of all the Blue Crosses. And then I've been advising a tech startup as well. It's kind of in the interop space, so I'm kind of looking at it from both directions.
Okay, great. Great to have you. So this week, let's take a look at last week's agenda. Yeah, I was just talking to folks about ASTP last week. So there was, yeah, I mean, there's definitely activity going on. I definitely talk to people about SQL and Fire Analytics. I mean, still very interested in it. Yeah, we'll see where that goes because certainly the government is interested in the advancements in bulk fire. And I think as more fire data flows for more use cases across the board, including potentially quality, data quality, etc., I think, our work will become relevant. So I'll definitely keep anybody informed who keep the group informed if I hear more about that. But let's go to last week's to-dos. So my action items, maybe I'll share screen here so everyone can see what I'm looking at.
Hey, Arjun.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I was going to make a suggestion. I don't know how much time Brian has, but do we want to make the use cases the first topic in case Brian doesn't have
Yeah, Brian,
enough time?
we don't want to take up your time, but uh, yeah, we wanted to talk about, yeah, certainly use cases, and we can talk about, some of the funding opportunities as well. And then we can go through, our normal action items as well. But it's up to you, Brian.
Yeah, I'm okay just following. Yeah, stick with the agenda you had. We don't have to move things around for me.
Okay.
Let me know.
I think we're going to be pretty brief. It's not like we're going to go through line by line and look at code, etc. So action items for me, I didn't get to expanding the introduction or some of these. I did send the draft proposal over to Sandy. I had John and Nikolai look at it. So we should, regardless, have a track at the May Connectathon. Um, so I'm just waiting for a response from Sandy on that one. I'm not actually 100% sure what the next thanks, what the next step is there, because usually I've just communicated directly with Sandy, but there is responsibilities for the track leads. Like there's a set of meetings and things like that, and there's time frames for those. So I'll send around a link, at least in the notes, to the Confluence page, which tells you track leads, like the track lead responsibilities and um, deadlines and things like that. So, excuse me. So you guys should be aware of that. I hope to get some activity on these, but I was unable to do it this week. I'll try to see if I can carve out some time to work on my other tasks. Next up was Nikolai with, excuse me, reframe PR comment about extension we talked about last week. PR 309.
Yeah, we
Did
will
you?
do it in a few minutes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't get my normal prep time this week either. Today got away from me. So, all right, we'll expect that for next week at least, or um, you can post in Zulip, but we'll definitely chat about it and review it next week. Also, next up, additional operations for analytic case. I'm sure that's on your radar as well. Nicola, do you think we'll have some time to work on that, the operations for
Not,
next week?
yeah, not yet, sorry.
Yeah, not a problem. But that's kind of next up, I think, for the spec. And then John had a row index PR. I think I just saw you merged it. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah,
So
I only have one question, John. So what
Yeah.
do you think about visibility of row index? So if we have a nested expressions, it's still next for each. Should it be visible in a nested union and so on? Or it just
So what do you mean by visible?
I mean, so if instead of columns I have a union and then like complex expression, can I use row index inside like nested expressions? Not just first
Yes,
level.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. So do we need to clarify that at all?
So it should work like till the next for each, yeah, or the leaves.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. And maybe we should be, oh, we have said for each or null and repeat. We didn't actually say union. Maybe we need to say union there. Yeah, maybe we need to explicitly say union and have some test cases around union.
Mm-hmm. And then
But yeah, I would have thought that it would be all of those contexts and it would be per level. So you can nest, yes, but it restarts the numbering, right?
yeah. And maybe at this first line we can say like in all nested contexts as well until the next for each. Yeah. So which will
So I
override.
did have a go at updating your, what do you call it, processing algorithm. So it is in there. But I think maybe I should just take an action to make sure that the wording makes it clear about the levels of nesting and also the context in which it can be applied.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe documentation as one to do, and then test cases as a second to do, John.
Yep.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Okay, and then so to be continued, and then IG Publisher improvements. I didn't see any chatter about this, John, this week.
No progress. I've got Graham cornered in person for about 3 days in a couple of weeks' time, so that might be a good time to get all this stuff done.
I'm gonna take Graham hostage. Is that a
Pretty much.
yeah?
Gotta do what you gotta do.
You realize this meeting is being recorded.
Oh,
All right. All right. Cool. So those are the to-dos. Any other action items? Anything else high priority that we should have on our radar from the group? Trying to think if there's anything else right now.
So by way of an update about this PSS thing, yeah, so maybe click on this link, Arjun. Ruben actually showed me a good little diagram.
Okay, I will.
Hidden inside this thing.
Zoom does not like to click links. Right. This thing.
And if you click on that consensus review drop down,
Here. Oh, see,
you
yeah,
might have to be logged in.
I think I'm logged in. Am I not logged in? Oh, it's kind of like TFA.
That's right. I'll just please share my screen for a sec.
Yeah.
Oh, this is getting interesting.
Hold on. Too many windows. Can I see are you sharing? Oh, let me
Yeah.
stop.
So you can see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so apparently we have been approved by FHIR in their working group meeting. And now we're in a stage where it goes out to all the working groups and they have another round of saying, we're interested in being involved. And some other group that I don't exactly know what they do has actually said that. So I think we're up to like 3 groups or something that are actually tagged themselves onto us. And then it goes to this committee step for a final thing. And once that happens, it'll be official. And then there'll be some other processes to do, like that I have to find out about. But that's kind of where we're up to in the process. And you can find that by going to this ticket and clicking here. But
Okay.
down here is where the comments are of all the people who said that they don't care about us. But what's BRR? I'm not sure what BRR is.
RR.
But I think so. So we're up to what's it? Yeah, clinical CQI, security, and B. So we'll have to figure that out.
I'm just Googling, and it says, yes, biomedical research and regulation. I'll put it in
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Here, I'll put in the chat for. I've actually, I don't think I've ever interacted with BRR, but apparently that exists. Okay, well, let's do some homework on BRR. So next step you said was in that workflow diagram. What's the next, like, is the process currently running for consensus review or?
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
date on it. I can't remember what the date is, but there's like a sort of date that runs until, and then it'll get put on the agenda of the Uber committee. I can't remember what the Uber committee is called.
TSC.
But there's no actions for us until it goes through that process. And once it gets there, I can check in. Ruben seems to know the process pretty well, so I might ask him what we need to do beyond that. And yeah, it should be good.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Thanks for the update. I'm sure like the TSC and Gino will let us know if there's anything. Obviously, keep on top of it with Ruben and folks. Okay, great. So that's everything we had just in terms of housekeeping and checking in on to-dos. Yeah, just another call out to anybody in the group, anything that we should be aware of, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, we can turn things over. Jim, I don't know if you want to give a little introduction, because I think a couple people, I think maybe everybody was here, heard sort of the idea of what we wanted to talk about. But just very briefly, because I think everybody on the call was there the last time you presented, so I think it was a great overview. But yeah,
Well, maybe
for
for Brian's benefit.
Yeah.
So Brian, we have been trying to identify some use cases to test out some of the tools that the team has developed around analytics on FHIR. And I had been looking into the Rural Healthcare Transformation Program for another reason. And when I took a closer look at it, it seemed to me that there might be some valuable use cases associated with it. I took a look at Pennsylvania's plan, and I believe you are an advisor on the P3N security or board. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm on the Key which is a big participant of P3N,
Okay.
and I'm on their user group.
Okay, good, good. That's what I thought. So we wanted to first identify some potential use cases, and things that came to mind for me were things like value-based care, SDOH, population management, all of the normal things. And I think they're all part of each state's program in one way or another. But we want to start by identifying what specifically Pennsylvania is doing in terms of analytics. And we wanted to explore how they plan to make those whatever analytics services they end up providing available. Would that be done in a centralized way, or would that be done by the individual pairs of providers? So if you could give us kind of an overview of their plan around analytics, I think that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if I could just jump in here as well, Brian. I mean, I know you're potentially new to all
yeah,
this world of fire analytics. So, if it would be helpful, and I don't know how much of the documentation that Jim sent you got a chance to look at, and we could
That,
give you
that
a
would
little
be
bit of
none because Jim didn't send any. Sorry.
Okay. Well, how about I take like 3 to 5 minutes and just give you an overview of what this group is about, what we've been doing, where we fit in with kind of the ecosystem here, maybe some of the players, if that would be helpful, just to
yeah, that would
contextualize it a
be
little bit.
for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will make a very abbreviated version of my intro speech. So very, very briefly, right? FHIR's been around for 16 plus years. Obviously, I think you probably have some knowledge of what FHIR is about in terms of both the API and the data model. But from its very beginning, people were like, okay, this is great. Interoperability is great. We should really do this around the world. But also, if how can we use this, rigorous, standardized, semantically compatible model to analyze? We just don't toss data from place to place and call it done, right? We use it to make decisions. We want to understand these populations at scale, and so from the very beginning, that was the case. Um, Inherently in FHIR is trying to reflect, right, like the complex reality of human health, healthcare administration, those kinds of things. So they have these complex sort of models that the industry is not typically, familiar with or able to use. I mean, these are not, these are not like X12 transactions. These aren't claims data. This isn't, a flat file that you might use for quality reporting. So there's always been this kind of major tension going on. And in the past couple of years, a lot of really smart people and a lot of the leaders of FHIR, in fact, got together and said, like, let's really start taking on this problem. Like, what kinds of standards and tools do we need to truly aggregate and analyze FHIR data at scale, right? The government is forcing, regulating this and saying, this is the world of interop. We want you to use it. And so, but it's ultimately disconnected from all these analytics and not necessarily decision use cases, but definitely critical analytics use cases, right? Like population health, quality, and fill in your use case here, right? So a bunch of people got together and wanted to combine kind of the worlds, trying to figure out how to take this complex nested data structures and flatten them out and combine them and utilize this world of tabular data, particularly SQL databases was the bread and butter of healthcare analytics around the world. How do we, meld these two worlds together, right? So, a lot of really smart people thought about it for a number of years and came up with a couple of standards. The most recent one that we focus on today is something called SQL on FHIR v2. And what that is a standardized interoperable method to flatten complex FHIR data with lots of arrays and nesting, right, into tables, right? But in a way that is portable and interoperable, that you can share that mapping, right? A lot of people do that mapping, but it's very custom. And then there are these, subtle nuances about it that they're not even that subtle. There are lots of problems that people experience, right? And then people say like, well, you can't use FHIR data for analytics, right? Or I built this system and it doesn't really work that great. Like, what's the problem here? So that's what our group in particular, a lot of folks on the call have been working on the past couple of years to create this standard. You can read it. It's actually very easy to read. And we focus on that layer. We develop tools around this. It's gotten really great traction. We have many open source implementations. There's some commercial implementations there of this standard. So that's SQL on FHIR kind of in a nutshell. And what we are talking about right now with John is it is becoming a official HL7 standard later this year. So it is not, just a project that people are putting together. This is becoming a formalized standard. If you think about things like bulk FHIR, right? A lot of people in that group and the leaders of that group are leaders in this group as well, in that this is population level exchange, but you want to use this for analytic purposes, right? Like you want to use them. So there's a lot of interconnections between things that are important that people see out there in the industry and policy, but it's a little bit of this missing link to SQL databases, analytics at scale, quality measurement, BI, right? All those investments. So we're trying to bring those together. SQL on FHIR is the standard to do that. And then just taking a step back from that, we also think about FHIR analytics a little bit more broadly. So in that, using these kinds of tools and techniques to do things like FHIR to OMOP or OMOP to FHIR is one. Looking at different big data systems like Parquet, for instance, like how do we get FHIR data flattened and tabular, into these systems, and others, data quality being one. I work, a lot of us are very closely related to the next generation quality measurement kinds of things coming out from CMS and NCQA. So I'm very close to that team. I used to work in NCQA. So that's kind of like the big picture of what this group does. And of course, AI, comes into play quite a bit now because of it's getting really good at FHIR JSON data, no question about it. But, think about things like model training at scale and things like that. So that's what we do as a group holistically. And then what we want to focus on in some sense in this year is the standard is quite mature at this point. And now we want to start focusing a little more deeply on specific use cases, right? How do we get traction in the industry? How do we connect up with folks really trying to do analytics? And kind of get it into practice. So that's why Jim is talking about use cases potentially. Payer use cases are definitely interesting, but also other use cases, analytic use cases, HIE use cases. That used to be my area actually at NCQA was HIEs and audit and digital like information quality. So it's a space that I like, and I know that Jim pointed out that the rural health initiative, for instance, like is sort of it's seeding, it's funding some of these efforts. And so we'd be interested to hear your thoughts in particular on the use case side. And then, we can help kind of fill in the gaps or make connections into what we do. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful.
It was absolutely super helpful and much needed. But I do have to share that I don't have those answers. At least I could probably start to network with my network to pull something together, but it might take a couple of iterations with you guys to get there. I'm not like, I have similar, I don't know how they're executing at this point. And what I could bring to this group at the moment would be a lot of the pair use cases you guys may have already kind of, be aware of or covered off on. I do love the movement though.
We would love to hear about the payer use cases too, honestly. Like there's not a lot of not a lot of, I think individually have talked to a number of payers, but your insights into payer needs, payer use cases, would be incredibly valuable to us if you want to talk about that. And sure. Hear about more.
Yeah, I give you like a 30,000-foot view and we can go into detail, but just in general, the payers I think are very much in similar situations where they've run for decades based on the data that they had prevalent, and that's claim data. So, member files a claim, and we capture that information, so we know the provider, we know the services performed, and therefore have a whole mound of data that they can tap into. But it's all retrospective, so sometimes those claims take 60 days to get into the warehouse and be available for analytics to use. So the taste of near real-time clinical data is now captured everybody's attention. And so use cases are starting to really go gangbusters. But what, my role is a little bit more on the infrastructure side of how do I get that new plumbing hooked up so that I can get as much of the new data, the clinical data, the near real-time data in the hands of the traditional groups within a payer that are now like, oh man, who needs claims anymore when we can get like the patient was just at the doctor yesterday. Now we got a really good piece of information, or they're there right now. I mean, we have a couple examples of that as well. So, kind of retrofitting clinical data into historical use cases like HEDIS quality, risk adjustment, monitoring quality of provider performance, uh, customer service, even care managers, nurses making outbound phone calls. Like those are all, I would say, the traditional payer scenarios. But because we at Highmark are also an integrated delivery network, so we've got 14 hospital systems as well. We started the drive and pop insights into the medical record. So as a payer, we use that claim information and any other sources that we have, inject that back into the provider's workflow so that when they're seeing a patient, they're informed by more than just, what they see in the chart. Now the chart can be updated with things that happened outside of their purview. Maybe it's a specialist that the patient saw without notifying their primary care physician, or a program that they enrolled in because their employer sponsored it. One of the cooler use cases we have is a Smart on Fire app that pops when a patient is got certain conditions, diagnoses, or chronic conditions that we care about, that their employers actually purchased like a buy-up program for managing diabetes or managing your lower back pain. This is like a trend now where a lot of the payers are trying to like squeeze other angles into revenue streams. So upsell, hey, pay $10 per member per month, and you'll get specialized nurses calling when anyone in your company has these conditions. The bigger, so that's near real time. So patients in the office, they have those conditions. Doctor never knows they have that benefit, and the patient half the time doesn't realize they have the benefit. So the payer does. So the payer takes all the chart information, runs it off against the traditional benefit designs, pops back and says, hey, this patient's not only got these conditions, but they're eligible because their employer is paying for this bio program. So that all happens real time, and they can auto enroll, text messaging and so forth. So that's probably our most cutting edge use of clinical data from a payer perspective, where it's making that round trip all the way through payer, provider, and member, and having that continuum happen. The other big thing coming down the pike is CQL. The NCQA is requiring everybody to move to CQL, and then clearly the mandates are big too. I mean, a pulse check on the mandates, it does seem like it, we all talk a big game as we're going to use the mandates as a lever for truly doing interoperability and baking that into our business processes. But it really just still feels like we're checking boxes at this point, and we're not like there's extra investment required to get it to really turn the corner and be part of like mainstream operations. And I'm not quite seeing it yet. The
You're talking
association,
about prior auth.
yeah, prior auth, even the patient access API, getting more volume and utilization of that, and then the pair-to-pair APIs where each pair is, very similar to like financial services, where you can get information or carry your information as a person from, vendor to vendor. You should be able to do that as a patient, but a lot of it's just going to be checking boxes initially and not really embracing it. Like we're not changing our portals, we're not developing our own apps that would enable you to carry your healthcare individually. So I see that being a little bit slower of a path, and some of these other use cases being kind of leaders. Sorry, that's a lot of
No, no,
rail.
no,
That's perfect.
no. I think it may not be that relevant to John, who's Australian, but
Well, the other
it is.
thing too that will maybe resonate is, so I came out of the analytics group. I still serve them, and they, one example is, they just have a hard time navigating FHIR, and so I'm doing it. My focus now has been to accumulate, and store it all and get it all into FHIR. Less on the consumption side. And so now we're starting to, as we get to critical mass, if we do have a nice pot of gold here that people should be interested in, my next task will be to make sure like consumers know what they're getting. And right now it's kind of buyer beware, and you're starting to hear some complaints about like, hey, you guys are saying this is valuable, but like we're having trouble reading it. Like, what's the most recent
Mhm.
A1C? Like, how do I actually do that? And so like you have novice users trying to get to it. Some of the
You're
power
talking about
users are fine.
internal analytics users.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So one thing is that, I don't know if you'll follow this, but we sell these buyout programs. Let's say a company that's 10,000 employees, they have 2,000 of them have diabetes. So we say, hey, 2,000 employees, give us $10 per member per month. And then now they have access to the app, to nurses call them, this is a buyout
Mhm.
program.
Mhm.
But by that $10 per member per month, you're going to get so much more value out of not paying as many claims because their health
Right.
is going to improve.
Mhm.
And so the analytics team's responsible for showing that client, like the client comes
Mhm.
asking, in
Right.
month 6, like, all right, we've been doing the program now for 2 quarters. Like, am I breaking even on my $10?
How much? Yeah. What's the ROI? Right.
And
Like that's a critical.
they
It's a critical
struggle with
case.
that all. I mean, that's probably the one that's the most burning is
Hmm.
yeah, we're just not able to use this data we're getting back to give them really good answers yet. And claims is slow, and clinicals
FHIR
time.
is,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I mean, you're definitely speaking my language. So,
yeah.
if anybody's interested, but these guys know me for years, but I used to work at HR, but then got back into, well, I was kind of early in FHIR and then later, but so I worked at OneUp on patient access and analytics, and I heard
Yep.
this case where I don't know if I don't think Highmark is a OneUp customer or ever has been,
We
but
were for a period, and
okay.
then we signed up to do pair to pair. Then when they pushed it, we basically just
Oh, right.
okay.
Yeah. No, I understand. I get it. I
Again,
get it.
compliance
I-
only, checking boxes, no real spirit of like, let's really get the interoperability.
Right, right. No, I
Unfortunately.
hear you. I get it. But one thing that struck me when I was there, because I was the director of the analytics side of it, they actually had a SQL on Fire-like system, and that few folks were interested in. But we would hear from AD, ACOs in particular were interested in this. The I remember speaking to one a group, and they were like, "Well, we're really excited about it," and they were a Leap ACO, I think, and they they said to me, we were talking about our kind of sales pitch here, and they're like, what we really care about is the speed, right? Is the velocity, right? Because it's one day after adjudication, it has to land by law rather than 60 to 90, the claims lag. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't really think about that. And they're like, well, then we can act on it. And actually, in some of the measures, the follow-up measures require that it's like sometimes 7 days, sometimes 14-day
Yeah,
response.
yeah,
And like some kind of action follow up, phone call, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. There's no way you can use a claim for that. Like it's value is zero. So, um, and then I got into the NCQA program on DCS, the digital quality measurement. I'm good friends with them. I saw the chief architect last week at ASTP. This is a big, area of interest for us in some sense. We're sort of it's we we're not, it's not an antagonistic relationship, I think, between some people think it is. They're like, oh, well, you guys are the SQL guys, but we're the CQL guys. And I don't particularly see it in that way. I think they're complementary. There are things that SQL, there are advantages that SQL will have that CQL will never have. And there's some unique advantages to CQL, but there are very smart people working on this problem right now, trying to kind of meld these worlds together. I won't go into too much more detail, but I think you'll see more activity here soon. But for us, from our perspective, this group's perspective, it's how do we make fire data useful in the real world, right? To real world implement the real world end users. And you can't just carve off the world of SQL and standard
right.
analytics and say like, well, it's the world of CQL, which has frankly, not proven itself after, tens of millions of dollars in at least half a decade. And that just let's be honest. Not to make this a speech on my soapbox, but I'll get to the point in a minute, and then we'll go to Steve. But what I'd love to hear from you is maybe a little bit more granularity about how you think about FHIR data in your clinical data repository, in your data warehousing systems, like in terms of, how much FHIR data are you receiving? Are you normalizing non-FHIR data to FHIR? Are you going in the opposite direction to do analytics? Like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but let's go to Steve so I don't
All right.
talk too much.
I got that answer.
Okay, great.
I'll be happy. I'd love to hear your answer, and then I'll ask my.
Oh, sure. So we've gone like full spectrum. Are you guys familiar? You probably are of the Google Healthcare Data Engine,
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
and they just backed that out of the market, so they're no longer supporting it. So a lot of we had some initial experience with FHIR. We also used Smile CDR as our FHIR repository for the CMS ONC mandate only, so it wasn't core to our operation. But the healthcare data engine with Google is like right now in the middle of everything. So when I talk about accumulating as much as I can, it's all going in there. That does have a flattened view, clearly not meeting a lot of the needs. I'm still getting all those questions in there, not understanding. So not really meeting the mark. But our initial intention was to go FHIR internally as well. So all the consumers, like the traditional systems, the care management being like a flagship one, where you have nurses use that tool every day. They're helping with prior authorizations, but they're also doing outbound phone calls to engage our members and talk through them with chronic condition management. That system, we started connecting and having, delivering FHIR payloads through Kafka, and it hit to a point where we just every time they needed like a different flavor for a different use case, it was another project, and the business got kind of fed up with like, oh my God, another, like, you're charging me again for another connection. Like, can't you guys just get this care management system to read FHIR one fell swoop, and then we do all the use cases like iteration underneath the covers? Like, it shouldn't be, so it was almost like we were wiring every use case individually, because it's difficult to translate and get it into the right format, into the user experience that they were asking for. So given that learning, as well as, a lot of the other traditional systems, lack of adoption of just going and hunting and seeking it themselves, we started looking at all sorts of tools that convert for other applications as well. So all that combined, all that experience of consumers being challenged with FHIR, and then Google Healthcare Data Engine backing out of the market, we are now taking more of an open source, non-vendor approach. And in my words, more like a data lake environment where the data won't necessarily, we aren't forcing anybody to have to consume FHIR anymore. I've sat through like the architectural diagrams and such a few times now. So there's, we still have the ability to push it to FHIR to meet, interoperability use cases, but not forcing, those traditional systems as well as analytics users to have to consume. And so we haven't really come down on a ruling as far as SQL. I think, unfortunately, like, that's far enough away that people think we have breathing room. I know better because
4 years. It's not
yeah,
that long. It's
HEDIS
not
is like
long.
a 3-year process. So like, yeah, we got like, 6 months to figure that out, and we haven't done it yet. But so we're kind of like, right in the thick of it all. But we have clearly decided that we're not going to force FHIR on our consumers, both internal and external. So I think there's opportunity here with this group of like, okay, yeah, tell me more, and like, let's see where we're going here, because this is interesting to have a rubric. And that, I don't think CQL, in my personal opinion, as much as I know about it, it seems like a drastic. We already kind of went down the FHIR all in, and then got a little bit burned by it as far as the adoption rate. So going after CQL in that same manner seems like, a fool's errand, because, smells very similar in my mind. But maybe I could be wrong on that.
Thanks for that. I'm sure people have opinions. I know people have opinions about that. Steve, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, Brian, thanks for joining the group today. Made it to hear your insights, and especially on the FHIR topic. And I was not aware of Google's decision to discontinue that product. I guess one of the things that we struggle with, just as a vendor in this space, and I think the group more broadly, is just real world examples, types of queries that people who are operating in the industry have FHIR data. For your example, really quick example is like, what's the latest HbA1c is interesting. I'm wondering if, and you have 3 or 4 implementers of the SQL, wondering if you would be open to collaborating on series of questions like that. Some of us, if we chose to, could pull up a view definition, put a little example together. We could use the data to showcase how this is done. I think that's one area we sort of struggle with is, how do you go from using all this technology to real examples that people could follow?
Yeah, even better than that, I could probably, if we wanted to do like a offshoot meeting, pull a few folks in that are the ones that are really working through the analytics side, and we can get it here straight from their mouths. Like I'm the intermediary that's trying to help them get data, and sometimes they don't come back to me and complain, so I don't know if things are working or not. When they do come back to me, it's usually a complaint, and I realize that there's a use case there, so I can connect, with those folks, and I think they'd be happy to do it. And the other thing, I came out of that group, so I had put in a really rudimentary, library or catalog of standards that, had definitions associated. And that's not FHIR specific, that's just in general. So a big company like ours didn't want to wait around for a cataloging tool or some sort of like perfect way of getting repeatable definitions for certain topics. And so we came up with our own way of doing that with Git, and we just have a repo that, kind of captures it and has a little bit of a ceremonial, metallic levels, and you get to a point where it's certified. And then that way, if people want to know what the definition is of like the latest A1C score, there's a SQL query behind it that everybody can use. And I may be mixing and matching examples there, but you get the point of, a big company, there's not always a data element or a single database that has an answer to a business question, but those business questions that get asked over and over again, we memorialize that query in that repository. So we even have like a way that we can go through a repo and say like, hey, what are the heavy hitters here, and what are some examples? We could bring that to bear.
I think that would be fantastic. Yeah, to Steve's point, yeah, that's exactly the kind of sort of level of granularity we're looking for. We have some ideas. Obviously, we all work in this space, right?
Yeah.
But there's a real, credibility, I would say. And we haven't really had too many payers involved, I think, in the past couple of years. Maybe I'm the closest thing, I guess. But that would be fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure this group would be totally interested in that, and we can happily share resources. I will mention that we did a free 2-day online conference back in December where we collect and introduce what SQL on FHIR and FHIR Analytics is about, and then dive into a number of the different implementations. Some are more kind of advanced than others, but that's a good place to kind of get started. We have a bunch of introductory content for non-technical folks, for technical folks. So that's an easy way to absorb it. But, if these folks are on the technical side, really the spec is the place to go. And it is, I think, the most readable of all the HL7 specs that exist. And we wrote it that way specifically. So that'd be an awesome next step for us if you could follow up with that.
Yeah.
And we'd be happy to follow up with any resources as well, because payers have a lot of different use cases. They have some that are like very payer specific, but some that are quite broad. And I think the group would appreciate that. Feel free to chime in, guys. Oh, throwing my pencil.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, that use case that you described, Brian, where you've got this library of definitions and you can discover them and you can execute them and all that sort of stuff. That's basically exactly what we're working on, except like a standard version of that works over any FHIR repository.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're working on in this group.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. The point of this group is to create a standards, right? Such that a user like yourself will now be able to go to your vendors and say, once you implement that standard or not, right? Or we have a standard that we can flatten the data for your care management system, for your HEDIS engine, regardless of who. So there's an economic use case here too that should be eventually very powerful, I think. But yeah, I love that idea of looking at your kind of cow paths in some sense when it comes to the query side. So we're talking, we've worked mostly on the schema flattening side for the original, earlier work in the standard. And then in the past 6 months and moving to today, we are bringing in the query side. So how do you encode and encapsulate a SQL query in a portable, interoperable way? So I can make a library of queries that I can run on 3 vendor systems or something like that, right? Or that vendors can then implement the API for. That's what Nikolai is working on right now. So we're trying to close the loop in some sense. My vision, if I were to have one, is that you can have this kind of portable, I call it the analytic case, right? So a portable standards-based package that defines, maybe there are ways to do this in FHIR, obviously, of like, what are the requirements on the data? What is the schema I'm going to use or the mapping to flatten that data into a table? And then what queries, and then a selection of queries I'm going to apply to that data, right? And, maybe test cases or something for the results or expectations. So if you could package like all that up into one package, and that would be amazing. All standards based. And so you could take that, give that to system X, give that to system Y. We've already taken steps in this direction. What we're really filling in is the query side, in the structuring of the query, standardization of that structure, and the APIs, such that future FHIR servers can say, okay, just give me your analytic case. I'll run it against my data store. Here's the results in bulk FHIR, so to speak, or whatever. So that's where we're at. So I'm kind of giving you kind of the whole story, but very active development, and we're very open and very practical group in some sense. A lot of us are actually we have 3 major implementers on the call right now. And then there are several more. So yeah, I know I'm giving you the pitch right now, but
you scratched an itch. Like one example I just came up with is we have all these buy-up vendors. They're all different startup companies usually. Like, hey, we've got 25 nurses that are all diabetic trained, blah blah blah, and we've got a tool, we've got an app. Can you guys
vertical
hey, Mark,
things now?
Can we sell this to you and you sell it to your patients? And so we say yes, but now we've got this like hodgepodge of 12 vendors, and when you talk about trading information with them, they're startups that wasn't like high on the priority list is like interoperability with payers. It was like, let's get our product built right. And so none of them are FHIR enabled, and you're kind of in the Stone Age. Some of them have FHIR, but they don't like know how to use it well. And so knowing like simple questions like, did you talk to one of our members? What did, like when did you talk to them? What was the conversation? So we talk like big picture would be great if we just passed CCDs across that ecosystem amongst each other and just said, hey, like, we know every time somebody in our ecosystem has a conversation with you about your health, standardizing, a set of questions that we would be able to just say, hey, just give us this information when you partner with us, and we'll send you this information, and just being able to know where people are in the continuum of their healthcare, knowing that like somebody might have two conditions, two different people calling them for two different reasons.
Mhm.
Then you got Highmark calling them for their reason. Make sure we don't tramp on each other is a really big thing, like a traffic cop type scenario.
Yeah, I spin on that, and then I think a lot of people have to go at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I got you too.
There's the AI call, the HL7 AI call is at 4 o'clock, actually. I don't know if you guys heard about that. But that's an interesting case. Like that's a great standardization case, right? Because you have Highmark is a large payer. I'm actually, I think, a member. um, I'm in Lancaster. So
Okay.
um, and then you have this like cluster of sort of vertical disease, applications or startup companies, and you essentially have to integrate in a different way with each one. You want to communicate in a really seamless manner. Wouldn't it be great if you could package up the case, the analytic case, the query, right? And the data that you want, right? That they can absorb easily, probably in tabular form, sometimes maybe FHIR. But that query and give it to them, and then you get standardized results back, right? Or maybe, you know, we want to make kind of an equivalence, I think, in my view, between a kind of rigorous, rich FHIR objects and the utility of the tabular world, right? Like that utility is never going to go away. And so how do we make that seamless and usable as possible, right?
Yeah.
And reduce costs, honestly. Like if you say
Oh,
like
yeah.
you're just gonna have this model, it's super complicated, super hard to use, you can't actually do your day jobs with it. Like it's not, you don't really save anybody any that much money, right? So
Yeah.
um that's my pitch anyway.
We did a nice project with the Canadian guys during COVID, where they don't want to distribute data. They created a network where they can send the SQL queries, run them in different hospitals, and then collect back the like numbers, results. And it's also solving the problem of
Yeah.
like security. Yeah, so you're not sending the raw records; you're just sending the
Hmm.
aggregate, and so things getting much easier. And that's why, yeah, I just joined the new term which I called interoperable analytics. So I submitted talk to Vitalis, so we can start speaking about like interoperable analytics. So you can do the same analytic on different places. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have to wrap up. Sorry, I dominated the conversation, but hopefully it was a good introduction. And, I don't know if Jim, do you want to help just connect us, me and Brian, and then we can coordinate. This time slot's good for a lot of people, but we could potentially do others. So yeah, happy to help and coordinate.
Yeah, cool. And Arjun, you said there's going to be FHIR AI.
Yeah, it's the Dan Vreeman is doing this once a month call. It's called what is it called?
Oh, that was our idea to do that. I don't understand why I'm not on it.
Well,
Can you send me the
Dan,
link? Because we were speaking with him like for half year. We were thinking he just forget to doing that.
no, it's literally to
Who is on the
right now.
call? Gina, Josh.
Gino, I imagine Gino and Josh will be there.
Just talk to Josh today about that. Okay, so if you can send me the link, I would.
I'm gonna post it in the meeting in case anyone's good.
Thank you.
Will it be
But yeah,
recorded?
I don't know. This is the first one, so
This is the first one. Okay.
yeah. It's like, they got I think it's kind of the coordination of, HL7
It's
stuff,
just
but
the kind of kickoff. Okay, cool.
we can still do our own thing. So
Yeah.
I've got some ideas that's brewing. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.